Rishi Sunak has insisted he will not back down against striking workers, as nurses walk out in England, Northern Ireland and Wales for a second day. Nurses Union boss Pat Cullen has urged the Prime Minister to resolve the crisis before Christmas. But there is no sign of a breakthrough between the sides. Speaking to MPs, Mr. Sunak argued the best way to help workers would be to reduce inflation as quickly as possible. The UK is facing its biggest week of industrial strikes in recent history in the run-up to Christmas, with ambulance workers, customs and immigration staff, bus drivers and postal workers all staging walkouts. Head of the NHS Confederation, and a former Labour advisor, Matthew Taylor has warned that hospital leaders cannot guarantee patient safety during the strikes. In a letter to Mr. Sunak, he said, "It is clear that we have entered dangerous territory and we hope this warning from NHS leaders should serve to focus minds in government and in the unions that a swift resolution to this damaging dispute is needed." Mr. Sunak is facing calls to reopen talks on nurses' pay and deal with the growing wave of strikes across the public services. Addressing the liaison committee of senior MPs, he said, "I've acknowledged it is difficult for everybody, because inflation is where it is. The best way to help them and help everyone else in the country is for us to get a grip and reduce inflation as quickly as possible." He said sticking to the wage levels set by the pay review boards earlier this year was an important part of tackling high inflation. Despite the Prime Minister's insistence that he is holding firm, some Conservative MPs have said he will need to budge on nurses' pay. So far only a handful have said so publicly, but others have expressed concern in private conversations with the BBC. One former minister said the government would have to shift eventually and come up with more money. Another suggested ministers should consider offering a slightly increased offer, albeit still well below the 19% being called for, or a one-off payment to help with rising prices. A third senior Conservative added, "I'd be surprised if the pay offer as is on the table wins unless they are prepared to carry this on for 6 months." However, even behind the scenes, government officials do not want to get into details about possible compromises. And some Tory MPs are urging the PM to maintain his stance, fearing any concessions would encourage future strikes. "Give in to one group, then the whole lot will cascade around him," said one former minister. Speaking to the BBC's Today programme, Ms. Cullen said she was truly sorry for every patient who would have their care disrupted during Tuesday's strikes. "But we have no opportunity to do that because we can't get to a table to talk to government." In a statement released ahead of the strikes, Ms. Cullen said she believed the dispute could get wrapped up by Christmas if ministers engaged with union talks. However, she warned that if the government wasn't prepared to do the right thing, her union would have no choice but to continue striking in January. The Royal College of Nursing has called for a 19% pay rise, but the government has said this is unaffordable. Health Secretary Steve Barclay met unions ahead of the strike on Tuesday afternoon. However, Unite Representative One Kasab described the meeting as entirely pointless because Mr. Barclay had refused to discuss pay. Following the meeting, Mr. Barclay said the pay demands were unaffordable but added that he was open to engaging with unions on how to make the NHS a better place to work. New York bishop robbed during live-streamed service is arrested on fraud and extortion charges. The New York City bishop, who was robbed of around $1 million in jewelry during a live-streamed service in July, was arrested Monday morning and is facing fraud and extortion charges, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Lamor Whitehead, who leads Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries Church in Brooklyn's Canarsie neighborhood, was charged with 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of extortion and 1 count of making material false statements to the FBI, court documents say. In one instance, Whitehead, 45, is accused of convincing a parishioner to invest around $90,000 of her retirement savings with him under the pretense that he'd help her buy a home. Instead, he allegedly spent the money on thousands of dollars of luxury goods and clothing. He's also accused of using threats of force to obtain $5,000 from a New York businessman, which the businessman gave to Whitehead, the court document states. Whitehead also allegedly tried to convince the same businessman to lend him around $500,000 and give him interest in real estate transactions in exchange for favorable actions by the New York City government, which he could not obtain, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. FBI agents executing a search warrant were allegedly told by Whitehead that he only had one cell phone, when he in fact had a second one. As we allege today, Lamor Whitehead abused the trust placed in him by a parishioner, bullied a businessman for $5,000, then tried to defraud him of far more than that, and lied to federal agents, Damian Williams, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said. His campaign of fraud and deceit stops now. If convicted, Whitehead faces a minimum of 20 years in prison, court documents say. Whitehead's attorney, Don Florio, denied the allegations. Bishop Lamor Whitehead is not guilty of these charges. He will be vigorously defending these allegations. He feels that he is being targeted and being turned into a villain from a victim. In a court appearance Monday, Whitehead was released on personal recognizance on a $500,000 bond. The conditions to his release are that he can't travel outside of the southern and eastern districts of New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut, and he isn't allowed to contact the victims in this case, according to U.S. Attorney spokesperson Nicholas Baez. He must also maintain verifiable employment and cannot apply for a new passport. Whitehead made news in the summer when assailants stormed a live-streamed Sunday service and robbed him and his wife of $1 million worth of jewelry. When I see them come into the sanctuary with their guns, I told everybody to get out, everybody just get out, Whitehead said in a video posted to Instagram at the time. I didn't know if they wanted to shoot the church up or if they were just coming for a robbery. In September, the bishop made headlines again when he was removed from his church by police after video appeared to show him grabbing a woman and pushing her. He was preaching at the Brooklyn church when someone in the congregation started yelling inaudibly off camera. He paused the service to respond. "You wanna come preach?" he's heard saying toward the end of the live-streamed service. "Come on up here. I'm gonna make you famous." As a woman approaches him, video appears to show the bishop grabbing her hair by the back of her neck and pushing her off camera. The woman, identified as Tarsha Howard, was charged with trespassing and disrupting a religious service. Whitehead wasn't arrested, according to police, but the bishop disagreed and said he was put in a holding cell. "You put me in prison and then let me out and say, 'Oops, you made a mistake,' he said in a video at the time. 'But you don't get to arrest me for no reason. I'm going to protect my family.'"
"3M to end forever chemicals output at cost of up to $2.3 billion. Perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances do not break down quickly and have in recent years been found in dangerous concentrations in drinking water, soils and foods. Legal pressure over the damage caused by PFAS has increased. Last month, 3M and DuPont de Nemours Inc. were among several companies sued by California's Attorney General to recover cleanup costs. Investors managing $8 trillion in assets earlier this year wrote to 54 companies urging them to phase out their use. 3M has been facing a raft of litigation that has prompted the move, Victoria Scholar, head of investment at Britain's Interactive Investor, said of 3M's deadline. As investors prioritize environmental concerns, other chemical makers are expected to follow 3M's example. With 3M's scale and position as one of the world's largest producers of PFAS, we feel this could represent a turning point in the transition towards a more sustainable chemical industry, said Victoria Litton, sustainability analyst with Storebrand Asset Management. 3M said its annual sales of manufactured PFAS are about $1.3 billion with estimated earnings before interest, tax, depreciation margins of about 16%. The sales figure works out at about 3.7% of 3M's 2021 group revenues of $35.4 billion. 3M expects related total pre-tax charges of about $1.3 billion to $2.3 billion over the course of its PFAS exit. In the fourth quarter, it expects to take an estimated pre-tax charge between $0.7 billion and $1.0 billion, primarily non-cash and related to asset impairments. In August, the Biden administration said it will propose designating certain forever chemicals as hazardous substances under the U.S. Superfund program. DuPont said it was limiting the use of PFAS to essential industrial applications and working with customers to pursue alternatives. Two scientific committees within the EU's European Chemicals Agency are due to issue assessments of possible restrictions of PFAS in firefighting foams in March next year.